Lovely. Chair like this. Right. So just sitting comfortably, sitting upright to begin with, rub your hands together. And then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. And down to one shoulder. There you are. The other side. The upper part of your chest. Down to your belly, very gently on your belly. And then finally your legs. Sitting back. Nice sense of just allowing yourself to sink into the chair. Just make sure your feet are in a comfortable position. A little bit of weight in your heels, but not too much. And this general feeling of a sort of releasing or draining away, dissolving, different ways, different terms, to just leave us a certain amount of openness and space, particularly in the front part of your body. And in this position, just thinking about your breathing a little. There's always a very kind of light touch when we think about this, but we've done this before. It's always worth coming back to. Place your hands on your belly, just sort of below your navel. And see if you can feel any kind of movement there as you breathe in and out. A sense of your hands being pushed up a little bit when you breathe in, lowered down when you breathe out. If you can feel nothing at all, see if you can make just a deliberate effort to push your hands up a couple of times. Don't do it more than that, just so you kind of know what you're looking for. Then the same thing, just below your ribs in the solar plexus. And usually it's much more obvious here, I think, because this is where the lungs actually are, of course. But you may even be able to pick up the fact that as the lungs expand, part of what they do is expand downwards, not just outwards. In fact, quite a significant part going down. So there's a drawing of your lungs down into the lower part of the solar plexus towards your navel. So now when you move one hand back down, we're looking to feel that movement in the lower hand slightly before movement in the solar plexus beneath the upper hand. So that movement lower down creates a bit of space and eventually creates a bit of a pull down, like a vacuum. And I've described this as bellows breathing in the past, if you remember. Now, change position, come to the upright position. My suggestion is, to begin with, don't try and to produce that effect when you're in an upright position. Practice it sitting back or laying on your back, and just accustom your body to doing that, and it will gradually sort of flow into the upright position. But always remember how interlinked this is going to be with your posture. If you're really stiff and tight in your belly, obviously there's going to be no kind of movement there. So I want a good muscle tone, but one that still allows for the expansion and contraction in both belly and solar plexus. So we want a posture that doesn't require too much of those muscles of the abdomen to maintain itself. So coming forwards a little bit, feeling about a third of your weight in your feet, and just concentrate on that feeling for a moment, and just feel as though it's actually quite comfortable, and that your legs, your knees, your calves, ankles and soles of your feet are all kind of quite soft, and it feels as though, you know, if you're on sand, or if you've got a thick carpet underneath your feet, you would leave footprint there at the end of the session. More of your weight though back in your hips and buttocks. So the posture is a bit like a slightly out of line pyramid, where you've got this square base, four corners with your feet and your hips, supporting this structure that gets narrower as it goes up. And the top of the structure will be the crown of your head. I say it's slightly out of line because in a standard pyramid, that point will be above the very center of the square. And in fact, you're probably not there. You're with 2/3 of your weight back. You're probably a little bit further back, but the principle is still the same. And then turning your head. One image you might develop is to imagine elastic threads going from, you could say, from the crown of your head, or maybe from your shoulders to your feet, to your hips, maybe at other points around the edge of the square, and that the sense of pulling on those threads is at the moment in this central position equal all the way around. And we'll develop that image a little bit in a few moments. And then the shoulders. Going forwards. Hands down to your sides, elbows just very sort of slightly curved. Imagine round pillars either side of your body. Feel the opening and closing in your chest and upper back. and then raising your arms as though you're winding up cotton or silk thread. The whole of my arm is moving. Good if you just see the elbows moving a little there. And then back the other way. And rest your hands. Now, we're held here, as I said, you imagine those elastic threads. So as you tilt forwards, now the ones in front become a little bit slack, but the ones behind, from say the rear corners and so on, are extended out a little bit. And elastic, when you stretch it out, just naturally contracts, so it brings you back. And then you may want to go back just a little bit further and see if you can sort of detect that slight sense of extension, stretching, however you think of it. So it's probably easier to feel this in the back. What we want to make sure is that we get the maximum extension without stiffening up. So I suppose an image might be, another image might be in a musical instrument like a guitar, where you tune the strings. Too tight or too loose, and you lose the note, the vibration. You pluck the string, whatever, and the vibration goes up and down, and if it's properly stretched out, if it's in tune, it'll produce the correct note. Over tighten it and you'll lose that. So we don't want to lose that sense of almost vibration going up through the string. So we don't want to go too far, and we want to be able to recognize when we've reached the limit. And then turn in a little. So now, of course, we feel an extension on the opposite side to the way that we're moving. It's a little bit more complex than that, I know. But I'm just trying to give you an image. And if we think about this idea of tuning the body, then we can perhaps understand the sense of the importance of that for the movement of the energy, because vibration is just another way of describing energy, really. Go in the other direction. In a well-tuned musical instrument, you don't have to sort of pluck the string hard. Just the slightest touch will actually work. And so a good posture, correct posture, and not moving too far and so on and so forth, maintains not just the flow of the movement, but in a sense the ease of the movement. As soon as we start to strain, we have to start making more effort. And then more of a particular type of effort. We have to strain to produce movement. Whereas in fact, the effort we should be making is to maintain the posture, maintain the alignment, to monitor the movement so that in moving, we don't lose the posture, we don't lose the alignment. Go back the other way. Good. Come back to the center. Pull one foot up. Now eventually, if those images are working for you, you know, the guitar strings or the elastic thread or whatever, I've been talking about them mostly between sort of like the upper body and the ground. But we can start to feel that it really extends all the way down. And to an extent, you could probably say that things like muscle and tendon and ligament are sort of like those strings. And then on the other side, in particular, you could say for the fascia, you know, the muscle skin, is this interesting layer. It's the only continual layer in the body apart from our actual skin. And it essentially sits between the skin and most of the rest of the organs, not entirely all. And it folds around and holds them in place and so on and so forth. And it used to be thought completely inert and pointless. In fact, they've discovered, well, two things really. One, that it has elastic qualities. So actually, when we do this, we are potentially extending the fascia in the back. So that image of the elastic threads might not be quite so far-fetched as at first it may sound. The second thing they've discovered more recently about the fascia is that it has what they call semi-crystalline qualities, which probably doesn't mean much to you. It doesn't mean much to me, but for us, the significant part of this is that actually what it does is means that there are certain electrical qualities, electrochemical qualities possible that the fascia can act as a kind of electrical conductor. If you want to know the science of it, you have to find somebody cleverer than me. And that's led some people to suggest that the meridians, the Chinese meridians that they use in Chinese medicine, that are said to be energy channels, the jiao as they refer to them, actually exist within the folds of the fascia. So it's a kind of interesting idea. I think it's just it's a theory at the moment, I think. So these things kind of tie in with each other. Now bring your hands down and again turn them palm out, and this time with the movement of your weight. So in making these movements in the correct way, if we're straining too much in muscles of our back and our arms, our legs, we'll kind of override what's happening in the fascia. But if we aim to just soften and relax in those big muscles, they'll still be being used, but they won't dominate what's going on. And it may well sort of invoke the movement of the fascia at that point. So by not straining, we actually spread the load of the movement through the body. You know, we could do a movement like this in a way that sort of isolates 3 or 4 muscles, probably. But we look for the opposite in Tai Chi. When one part of the body is in motion, the whole body is in motion, is what we're told. Then change into fisherman cast net. And now coming over, so you can feel, well, for want of a better term, I describe as a stretch. I think stretching is probably the wrong word, but a soft stretch. When I get to here, I can feel that extension up my back, over my shoulders, down my arms to my fingertips, and the whole line of extension contracts and serves to bring my arms up and over. And then go apart. And now we can feel the extension and contraction in chest and upper back. And on the inside of the arm here. And on the outside of the arm here. Let me just shift back a bit. Pushing away. So one of the reasons we're always urged to relax, and so with this one, for instance, you want to try and keep that feeling of your shoulders hanging down, is to give yourself a chance to just recognize how else your body can produce the movement. We want to get away from old habits of movement. You're pushing something, and so the habit is almost certainly going to be to kind of shove with your arms, for instance. And then hands fisted. So by deliberately not using our shoulders in the same way or whatever we're not using, we actually give ourselves a chance to recognize different ways of moving. And we want those to become habits. And to replace the old habits with the habits that encourage the sense of the whole body moving as one unit. Because when we change from, say, for instance, simply sort of lifting our shoulders and dropping them down, we tend to get a more sort of holistic movement. Now go back to Pigeon spreads its wings, do the little sequence of 3. Looking to be both precise about each individual movement, how it starts, how it finishes, but not rigid and flowing from one movement to another. This is a tricky combination to sustain. But the precision helps to preserve our posture and our alignment, and the flow provides the connection from one moment to the next. One more time, one more round of this. Now turning your hand out. Well, remember those winding movements that we did at the start of the class. This is quite a strong movement in lots of ways, and the rotating, pushing out, and then the pushing forwards. You feel your chest opening here. Closing a little, coming into the push, now feeling your elbows drawn together. One more round. And change. Trying to maintain the same sense of connection through your body, the same style of movement. So even though you haven't got such an obvious ally here as your weight moving, you can still feel that this isn't just about your arms and your shoulders, or even just about your upper body. Legs are involved, the back is involved, of course. That sense of the movement rising and falling, very much a feature. And with your feet and your hips will feel themselves being pushed gently downwards. And again, make sure that you're not resisting that you just soften the sole of your foot, your ankle, your hips and lower back. One more of these. When we go into the wild goose, our hands are extended out, but we want to retain that elasticity all the way down to our arm and into our fingertips. So two things really to consider with a movement like this. because it's always more difficult when your arms are extended out. One is simply practice. We want the correct conditioning in muscles of our arms and our shoulders so that this is within their capacity. Then they'll be able to do this without stiffening up. The other is to make sure we don't overextend, because as we're finding out, we lose that elasticity in the body when we do that. So this is where your hands are, not here. You can almost see, actually, look at my shoulders. When I push my hands out like that, my shoulders start to come up. It's more difficult to drop them down. But here, even if they're up to start off with, I can let them drop. And I can begin, when that happens, I can begin to feel the expansion here and here in the sides of the body, pushing my arms and in particular my elbows up and out. And then parting the clouds. Same thing with all the exercises. This is one of the reasons we're careful about how far we move. Because once our body is fully extended, it begins to lock up. And that becomes a barrier to that internal movement, the flow of the energy. Which is why I was trying to emphasize that we're not trying to stretch. I think stretching is a good thing, but not while we're trying to move in these exercises. Now, dragon plucks the stars from the sky. And then bring your hands around and pushing in two directions. That growing awareness of subtle movements might be maybe in the fascia or wherever is one of the things that will lead you to appreciate the subtle changes between one movement or another. Even here, part of the same exercise, the first movement is a lengthening through your back. The next movement starts the same way, but you begin to broaden as well. Very subtle differences, which as you become more familiar with, will begin to respond to your awareness of those images, because it tends to be those parts of the body that make smaller movements that are more responsive to images, ideas, intent from our minds. So now when we had to turn, we want to turn from the hips and be careful that the act of turning doesn't create a tightening anywhere in the upper body. That would be like just laying your hand across the strings of the guitar. It would throw everything out. And also careful about how far we turn again. Another sort of outcome of working in this way is that we become aware of those areas that are quite stiff or blocked in one way or another. And once again, we can use our awareness to try and release them. Sometimes simply being aware of them is sufficient. Other times, we might want to be a bit more analytical. Are we doing something in the movement or in our posture that is reinforcing that tightening? Other times, again, we might just use a simple image, water flowing over a rock in a river and gradually wearing it away, for instance, is one that I quite like. Other people like to imagine breathing in to those areas and breathing out the tension and so on. Just the different ways that we can engage mind and body together. And in Chinese medicine, again, it's said that the energy will follow the mind. One more time. So that mind training element, when we apply to the precision of posture and the movement, focusing our attention, becomes another tool that we can use for our own well-being. Scooping the sea and looking at the sky. And then grasping the tiger's ears. Switch sides. And change. Good. And our bodies are naturally responsive to images and ideas of all sorts of sounds. It was Pavlov, wasn't it, who discovered he could ring a bell and make his dog salivate in anticipation of being fed. The example I often give to people is goose pimples. That if I said to you, so just make some goose pimples on the back of your hand, you wouldn't be able to. But if you were reading a book or watching a documentary about people in Antarctica, then even if it was quite a hot day, if it was a good book and the descriptions were good, you'd start to feel cold and you'll start to get goose pimples. So these small changes in the body, we know from our Tai Chi practice, are the ones that build up into big effects. So at first sight, it might seem that the image of breathing in to an area that is tense, or imagining the movement like water flowing over a rock in that area, actually is what's that got to do with it? But it can produce changes, and this is something that in Tai Chi we really cultivate this mind-body overlap. Everybody can do it, but most people aren't particularly in control of it. But in Tai Chi, we take ownership of that, and it becomes a useful tool for us. Now, an exercise I started to do, I think it was Tuesday, I started to do. It's called bear play. Just we'll build that up again slowly. Start by just going forwards and backwards. And we're going to do something quite sort of familiar, but this time I want you to, in a way, reduce the amount that the weight is moving. I want you to just roll one side over. So there's a bit of movement forwards, but not too much. And I may have said one of the nice things about bear play is that we really sort of get this rolling movement in the shoulder. And you can see, I'm exaggerating, but it's like the shoulders go through this nice smooth circle. You can feel the shoulder blade sliding up and down your back. And it's a definite kind of push from the hip here. Let your hand come down to your side, and it's like you're turning a big wheel at the side of your body, pushing down. So, you know, your whole body expands, drawing the wheel up. You push down with your feet and your hips. You go forward. You let your body contract down. You imagine some sort of resistance to the movement. I'm just old enough to remember clothes ringers, the old mangles that my nan used to have. You can imagine one of those just squeezing out the moisture from the clothes. And then try on the other side. So first of all, just get this movement. So this is all a little bit exaggerated. And then your arm following. And the body's turning a little bit. So this time, you turn, and as you turn back the other way, so that brings the other hand back into the movement. A slight shift of your weight following the hand. This is bear play. And you want to try and feel that your back and your spine are moving very fluidly. Almost as though they're being massaged. expanding, contracting, expanding upwards, and then just letting your body contract. With this lovely image of the bear, both quite supple and soft in a way, but also, of course, very strong. Let's do one more on each side. Once again, rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder. Your arm. The other side. Upper part of your chest. Belly. And your legs. Yeah. Standing. So, feet parallel. You could imagine the same kind of images, of course. So when, for instance, we can try, we do this exercise, gently rocking forwards and backwards. We can imagine the elastic threads either going down to the feet or maybe spread out a little bit more. Doesn't really matter. I mean, if it's an image that works for you and helps you to develop that feeling, then that's what's important. And of course, one element of this is that, you know, if you go forwards and the elastic threads in the back stretch out, then they'll contract and pull you back. So there's a continual movement from one point to another. This is why we say that the movement is unceasing. The act of moving in one direction automatically creates the potential for another movement. And you could go around in a small circle. So the idea is not to resist the return. So if I go over here, I can feel the pull down there. If I think, right, I'm going to go a bit further, now it's tightening up. It's learning when to allow yourself to move, to not resist these very natural processes in our body. Shake out. And again, that's an awareness going all the way through. So sinking down and pushing up. In very broad terms, yang changes to yin, yin changes to yang. Yang extending, yin contracting. And we're looking for a harmony and a balance between them, also contributing to the quality of the movement. And so we become very sensitive to these changes within our body and to the idea that we're not going to fight against them, we're going to work with them. And this is something that just spills out into the rest of our life, hopefully. Change to the wild goose. I mentioned Chinese medicine earlier. The foundation of Chinese medicine really is to develop this, excuse me, develop this feeling of harmony, of flow, of balance in the movement of energy through the body. That's governed by the principles of yin yang, opposite movements blending with each other rather than straining against each other. And then parting the clouds. One more time. I'll give your legs a shake. One foot forwards. Transferring your weight. Here, we might describe the yin yang movement as filling and emptying, or we might imagine springs being compressed. So there's all sorts of different ways that we can visualize these things. The important thing is not to overdo any of the movement in any direction of any type, so that it becomes a strain. And you'll find that your body, for instance, here, the leg is compressed, it sort of starts to push back. And we want to be able to recognize when that's going to be happening, so that we're ready to go with that. And we don't to anticipate it, but we don't force ourselves to stay somewhere. And then on the other side. Shake. And let's do fisherman cast net. Same thing. The front leg fills up. We feel that extension through the upper body. It gets us to here. Here, suddenly I can feel the pulling. My body is fighting against itself, if you like, which is not the idea. So you sink back and push forwards. Aware of the flow of the movement. That's a good indicator, because that flow will be disrupted when there's any kind of disharmony, shall we call it. On the other side. Good. In the chair. Go back to your chairs. Giving yourself a few moments again to settle into your posture. Using whatever images, ideas work for you. Your hands drop down. And then embrace tiger, return to mountain. One more time. And rest. Lovely. Thank you very much once again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you
Thanks
all
for
next
coming.
week.
Yes.
Yes,
bye.
it's due on this week. So have a good weekend if you're doing
Yes,
anything special, if you get a chance to do anything, and look after yourselves.
Yes, you
See
too.
you then.
Yeah.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.